Live. I'm going to be talking with Alfie today. I'm just waiting for him to get set up on here, and then we'll get connected and get started. Right, we got there in the end, Alfie.
We got there. How are you?
How you doing?
Yeah, I'm not so bad. How are you?
I'm very good. So I was just gonna introduce because I was just starting there before we joined, linked together. So I'm going to be talking with you today a bit about your OCD journey, and for those of you who follow this page on Instagram stories, seeing that Alfie is battling cancer currently at the moment, and his journey with that too. So, Alfie, good to have you here today. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you fine now, yeah, all good.
There's a little bit of an echo. Have you got it on speakerphone, your end, or no? Let me hear, let's see here. If you speak now. Yeah, that's fine. I can hear you perfectly. Okay.
Cool.
So, what I was going to say to you is, the first thing was, I remember the other day when I started speaking to you, and obviously you just started the chemo, and you were a bit nervous about losing your hair, and now it's one of the first times with you now speaking to people and having a different view on that.
Yeah, well, it's part of the journey, I guess. It's a bit of a trademark. Yeah, for those of you that don't know me, I don't actually look like this normally, but unfortunately I am going through chemo. Yeah, it looks. I mean, my brows are hanging in there, aren't they? They're doing all right.
Yeah, your eyebrows are still there. You're all right with that.
Yeah, a couple of more weeks, I think they'll be gone. But
now, the best place to sort of start off today with it, Alfie, and it's great to have you here because when you go into your story and obviously you'll be shining light on your journey, people will see the sort of incredible sort of the mindset that you have given the circumstances when we start discussing things. So I think the best thing to do is to go back and just talk through when you came to me and where it began.
Yeah, okay, well, I'll give you sort of a bit of a background. I'm not really open. I haven't really been open as such with my OCD. I mean, since I've been obviously kept this diagnosis, I've gone public to my friends and my family. I've started a new Instagram page, which you're obviously tracking. But it's not something that I've actually spoken about before. But I thought, we've spoken before and we've said that, this is probably a good platform to speak about it. So to give you a sort of background behind prior to all of this, I have actually suffered from OCD for, I think, since I was about 17. I actually got like an official diagnosis, but I'd say it was probably, from when I was a child, I was always been sort of like an anxious child. I always had sort of, when I look back at it now, I can see it was the OCD mind at work. But I guess when I was a kid, I used to have, it was never really interfered with my life, but I guess the main symptom when I was younger, I used to have weird thoughts. Looking back at it now, it didn't, at the time it didn't really feel like it was anything, but looking back now, it was mainly like having thoughts about my parents dying. It was mainly my mum and dad, so I'd have like an intrusive thought, like, oh, what if my mum had a car accident on the way home? And then I'd be constantly panicking, and I'd try and call her work, and I'd call her phone, and I'd try and just get reassurance. That, looking back at it now, I can see that I was just trying to get reassurance to make sure that didn't happen. So I guess that was sort of the first sort of manifestation of, if I look back at it now, OCD. I think things really took a turn when I finished school. For those of you in the UK know that when you finish school, you go into sixth form. And it was in my first year of sixth form was when I first had sort of like my first OCD trigger. And like so many of the themes of OCD now, I can look back at it now and I can really laugh at them. But being at the time, I mean, it was really horrific. I mean, I think the first one I had, if I remember correctly, it was to do with harm OCD. So I think it was just one thought that I could possibly harm somebody else, or if there was like a knife in proximity between me and somebody else, that possibility of that happening would just the fact that I could actually pick up that knife and stab it really freaked me out, and I'm sure other people have had the same thing. And then after that, it's very, very common. And I know that as soon as I got over that, I was like, I could look at that now and I was like, what the hell was I thinking? But then, like, I've had pretty much every single OCD theme I can think of, like, top of my head. I went for a stage of worrying about health, which then obviously manifested again recently. What else? Pretty much, you could probably tell me one, and I'd tell you that I've had something like that, and for months and months at a time, that would consume my life. I'd think about it all the time, and it would be really tough to sort of get on with it. So that was when I was 17. Was the main. Yeah, I went for about a year I think it was when I had like I call it a relapse, because I did seek help at that point, and I did get better. I felt. After about a year after that, but I think it was maybe when I was about 22, 23, I'm 25 now, I had another sort of episode with a different theme, and that was when I actually got a diagnosis of OCD. When somebody said OCD to me, I was like, what is that? I just thought typical wash your hands, the typical OCD stereotype.
Absolutely.
At that point, and when they said, when the lady said, I think it was really stupid. I think I was worried about being gay at this point or something like that. And then she was like, this is just typical OCD. And I Googled it, OCD and whatever female it was, and all this stuff come up. And all these different forums and stuff, and people were saying they've been through the same thing. And at the time, I remember thinking, I've got to be the only one that thinks like this. I've got to be the only one in the world. But then it turns out there's so many of us, and then obviously like the community that you've started is so common. There's so many of us that are going through the same thing.
Absolutely. You can always think that you've got one thought that's different, but I mean, all the years I've been doing this, and I've spoken to thousands of people with OCD, you never see, I very rarely come across something where I think I've never heard that one before, because they all overlap in one variation of another. And I think then that gives us sort of a good background of your journey, which if you look at, say, my own journey, it started off with going to church, swearing against God in my head, thinking I was going to hell for it, because obviously you can't control those thoughts, all other versions of sort of harm and variations of that as it sort of moves. But then you don't realise that when you're young, because you think you're not going to ever question that you've got a mental health disorder, because it's not the kind of thing a kid thinks about. And then that comes along and brings us more up to present day, where you then came to a position where health OCD was then sort of lagging and sort of latching on. And that's when you got in contact with me. Now, if you just go a bit through that part of your journey with the health OCD, so people can have a sort of understanding of that.
Yeah, of course. So I guess it was maybe a year ago now. I can't say that, it's really difficult for somebody who hasn't got OCD. It's difficult to understand, but I'm sure everyone, the people that listen to this now that have, when you're in like the cycle of OCD, so you wake up every morning, you have that sinking feeling, it's horrific, and then you're doing everything to try and get rid of it. I wasn't in that, I haven't, even like when I first sought your help, I haven't been in that like typically, really struggled state of being, it's completely consuming life. It was just one of those things where it was bothering me constantly. I started having intrusive thoughts.
It was bothering you though, Alfie. It was bothering you. Consuming your life. But people don't contact me when it's just, it's not bothering them at all. It was bothering you enough that you definitely wanted to get in contact. Yeah,
so that theme was around health. So I felt like I was almost cured from OCD. Yeah, I think people with OCD know when they're cured, when they're not following any code, when they're not on forums, anything like that, when they're not seeking any reassurance. I wasn't doing any of that. Whereas before I would spend, hours on forums and stuff trying to make sure that maybe it wasn't me, maybe it was OCD, all that sort of stuff.
Health sites was the problem initially, getting you to stop Googling symptoms.
Yeah, and I think it was just, so I'm trying to think back exactly what the trigger was at the point, but I think it was probably about a year ago. I think I had I felt a lump in my stomach, and I didn't know what it was. And then I thought, the typical, I'd never really had much experience of sort of health OCD or health anxiety at that point. And then I was like, I better get doctors to check that out, because it felt like a lump in my stomach. So I went to the doctors, and they just felt, yeah, we can feel it. I will just refer you to wherever it was. I think it was like a GI specialist. And at that point I was like, oh, what if the lump's cancer? But they had like an OCD, it was like an OCD form. Oh shit, what if it is cancer? And then I was really panicking. was thinking, obviously, how the OCD mind works. You know, well, what if this happens? What if I get told, and what if they find out there is cancer? How am I going to tell my family? All that sort of stuff.
Now, this was a long time before cancer was even in the picture.
Yeah, this was a year ago, over a year ago. Anyway, they went for a scan, have an MRI scan, and I was absolutely convinced that this guy was going to come back and tell me I had cancer, and I was absolutely bricking it, stomach cancer or whatever this lump was. He had an MRI scan, went back, and the guy was like, no, it's all good. Couldn't even find anything. It was like an unremarkable scan. Couldn't even find anything on there that you're feeling that we could feel. So at that point, I thought, oh my God, what the hell is that all about? I'd spent the last 3 weeks constantly panicking. Like absolutely consumed that this is what I was going to get. And when I was told that, no, this is nothing, I was like, I couldn't believe it. And then I realised, obviously, I think at that point I was like, I really need to seek your help.
That's where you sort of came in about that point. Because then there was a sort of a window of time where obviously then OCD was latching on. But then when you came into me, you got to the point where you'd found a lump on the clavicle, hadn't you?
Even before then, I think there was another thing. I've had a problem with my shoulder. I was a goalkeeper when I used to play football. I had a problem with my shoulder for probably about 3 years. And I've had so many diagnostic tests on that shoulder. And they kept finding really random stuff with the bone. And it was always, they never suggested there would be anything malignant or anything like that. But I would always think, what if it's something bad? What if it's cancer? Or and then I think every time I'd go in to get my scan results for my shoulder, I'd go back and they'd be like, oh no, it's just nothing. It's just whatever, it's your bone repairing itself. So I had loads of experience of going to the doctors or going to see a consultant where it just turned out to be nothing. Yeah. So in my mind, I realised
most people go to the doctors and there's that case. But then there's one time where in this sort of very, very rare instance, you found this lump, and then you started going for tests with the doctor when you found that, because obviously with your relative that had cancer, you thought that this is a real lump. You need to go to the doctor. So we thought, right, go to the doctor and then carry on from that position, Alfie.
That's something. That's something to mention, I guess. My cousin, close family relative of mine, had recently been diagnosed with cancer, found a form of bone cancer earlier on last year. So with that on top, obviously all of that stuff that I just mentioned before was going on before then, but I don't think that helped.
How old was your cousin?
He's the same age as me. He's 24, 25. So I don't think that helped the situation. I definitely maybe thought that may have helped. That may have triggered more anxiety. But anyway, getting to the point of the diagnosis, I think it was around. So my cousin was diagnosed in February. I think it was around May last year. I was at the gym and I was working out, and as I was just pulling my arm back at the gym, I felt like a lump pop up between behind my collarbone. And as I felt it, I was thinking, that's weird. And I was, I wonder if it's a lymph node. So I didn't think anything of it. So I did think anything of it. I was panicking, obviously. And I went to the doctors the following day. And actually, I did Google it because I shouldn't have done it. I know I shouldn't have, but I did Google it. And the first thing that came up, it was all, when you say lump of collarbone, everything that came up, and I know this probably scares some people, but the first thing that came up was a lump of collarbone. 95% of people, if there's a lump of collarbone, it's cancer. So at that point, I was like, oh shit, so I've got to go to the doctors. I went to the doctors the next morning, and I had, and the doctor saw it and said, yeah, it's a lump of collarbone. He was like, we'll give you an ultrasound. So luckily I have private healthcare through my work, so I was able to get the ultrasound on the same day. I really didn't want to wait around with uncertainty for that long. So, but went over to the doctors.
What do you mean wait around for uncertainty? You're an expert at that. You should have been with uncertainty there, Alfie.
Yeah, I am now. But at that point, I was just like, I need to find out now. I don't want to be panicking. So anyway, and funny that I was actually going to Tenerife for my wife, literally the day after, and I was like, I'm not spending my holiday worrying about this lump. I'd rather know now. So I went to the doctor. Had the ultrasound, scanned it. The guy looked at it and was like, I had shoulder surgery like a month before, and he saw that on the notes, and he said, oh, it's on the same side as your shoulder surgery. I said, yeah. He went, oh, it's just to do with your shoulder then. It's nothing. He's looking at me. He was like, you can usually tell if they're. I remember his very word. He was like, malignant lymph nodes are ugly. He said they're ugly. He was like, this is just normal. He was like, I won't worry about it. He didn't. And at that point, he didn't say anything like, don't come back or anything if it gets bigger or if it doesn't change, come back. He just said, just don't worry about it. It's to do with shoulder surgery. And at that point, I was just like, that was enough for me. I was like, cool, that's fine. So I went on, enjoyed my holiday. And then that was, I think, like I said, May or June last year. And then it was around, so that, knowing that, when he told me it was fine, obviously I've got an expert opinion on that. I was like, that's cool. And then I was absolutely fine for the next 3 months. Went on my own life, and then when I was at the gym again, I was doing that again, and then this thing popped up, and I was like, that's still there. And I hadn't even checked it, because when I was told that it was nothing, I was, that's fine. So I checked it out, and I was like, that is definitely got bigger. I was like, I'm sure it's got bigger. It's just right here. I don't know if you can see what the scar is here.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah.
I'm sure it's got bigger. And the guy went, I was like, do you know what, I'm going to go back to doctors. And at this point, I was convinced it was definitely my OCD, because all these stuff that I've checked out in the past that come back negative, I was convinced that obviously it was just me being anxious and it was my OCD at works again. Well, I guess it kind of was, but in a way, not. So I went back in September to the doctors again. I said, look, I've got this lump. He didn't tell me to come back, but it's still there. Yeah. I said, and I think I was speaking to you a lot at this point as well. Anyway, I went back to he said, we're going to send you for another ultrasound. And at this point, I went to see a different sonographer who specialises in head and neck radiography. He had a look at it, scanning around, and he was like, by that one feeling, it was horrible. It was just a couple of days before my wife's birthday in September, and he was looking, we planned to go away the weekend. He was looking at it, and I just looked at it, and I saw his face. He was like, And that's like something you don't want to see. And I was just like, I don't know. He literally turned to me, he's like, I don't know what it is.
OCD sufferers will be watching this now going, but my doctor went, that means I've got it, but it's not.
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry. It's gonna freak everyone out. Just know that I'm probably taking all your bad luck, everyone. Don't worry. But he's had a look at it, and he's just gone, not sure. And I was just like, at that point my heart sank. I was like, fuck. I was expecting him to just be like, it's fine again, like the last guy. So he had a look at it, and then he was just like, I want to do a biopsy. And I was like, okay. So I was like, okay, this isn't good. And when you use biopsy, just my association with biopsy is just cancer, and cancer is death. I was just like, that is horrific. So anyway, he just put a little needle in. He was, I'm going to stick a needle into the lymph node, and I'm going to test it and see how it is. I did that, and then it was like a week wait, and the results were being sent back to my GP.
You were anxious at that point.
Yeah, I think
that was the new early days to you, and completely understandably to anyone they would be anxious in this point. But the only reason I'm mentioning this is because obviously later on in the journey where things have been more scary, you weren't anxious as you were at this point because it was still sort of early days and you weren't yet into the way you were rationally seeing things and thinking about things.
Yeah. That's right, definitely. And I didn't. But I think when he was sort of giving me that thing, I was definitely took a turn. So that week was really tough, waiting for these results. And I was working in London that week, and I was waiting for the phone to call. Like the Dr. GP said, they'd call me as soon as they found out the results. And I was panicking. I was actually convinced that they were going to tell me. And the guy did say that it could be a lymphoma, which is obviously a type of blood cancer. At the time, because he said that's what we were, but one of the things he did say when he did the biopsy, he says it could be a lymphoma. He was like, and I was like, if you had to give me a percentage, I was so desperate. I was like, if you had to give me a percentage, what would you say? What are the percentages of telling me this of this being bad? He was like, low. He said 5%. So at that point, I was like, okay, 5%, I can deal with that.
It doesn't silence the voice of OCD.
No, it didn't, and it didn't, and I was like 5%, and I was like, okay. So anyway, it was a Wednesday. I remember I was at work and my phone rang and I saw it was a private number, so it's got to be the GP. And then I spoke to the GP and they're like, hi, we've just been told to call you. And I was like, have you got my biopsy results back? And they were like, let's have a look. So they had a look. And they came back and they said, it's negative. It's all good. Just he read out the report on there and it said, it's a reactive lymph node. Just signs of reaction. All the cells in there are normal. So I was just like, "Are you joking?" She's like, "Yeah." She's like, "Oh my God." And I was like, I said to the woman, the guy pretty much told me it was, but I know he told me it was 5%, but in my mind that 5% was 99%. So when I was told that, I was actually euphoric. I was buzzing. I'd like completely ruined the last week of my life, and it was horrific. And at that point I was like, okay, that's it now. This is like really, this whole health anxiety thing has gone out of hand, because this thing is just plaguing on now for quite some time. So at that point, I was like, that's it, I'm nipping it in the bud. I had a biopsy. In my mind, biopsy, you mean 100% certain that that's not cancer. And so that was it. And then we come to November, so probably 6 weeks later. I'd been having quite a few symptoms, like random symptoms, like really sweating, like absolutely drenching night sweats at night. Really bad.
And being a very common anxiety symptom that I had and so many people have, that you will get nighttime sweats, and they can come about at any time. So it's very easy for you as an anxiety sufferer to not understand which is which. I mean, even long into my own recovery journey, so as Claire Weeks, obviously you guys hear me talk about a lot, one of the pioneers of anxiety, talks about that in nighttime in our bed, we can't protect against having a panic attack or being anxious at times. I've had a night where suddenly I've woken up sweating, and think, God, it is a bit cold in the sheets now, because it's just come on out of nowhere, right? And that's out of our control. So it's very easy to think, oh, it's just anxiety. However, in your situation, you'll carry on now and say,
yeah. No, absolutely, and that's what I thought as well. I thought, everything, the stress and everything going on, and then a couple other symptoms I had, like itchy skin. I was like, I have, my skin's quite red anyway and tender, and I was like, maybe it's just from that, or it's the change of, it's heading towards winter now, maybe it's that. And then also one of the main symptoms I had was back pain. I was horrific back pain every night.
The common symptom that people talk about with cancer, pain with the night sweats.
Exactly.
People often pass those off as injuries. I remember the actor who was in the film Be Here Now, which is one of the films that I get people to watch when they're in on the recovery journey with me, talks about how he thought that his lower back pain was from just deadlifting too hard in the gym. Yes. So he'd never ever questioned that it was in fact cancer that was causing that.
Exactly, yeah. And that's what, funny enough, when the back pain was getting really debilitating, it was in the day it would be absolutely fine. Every time I'd go to sleep, it would be absolutely, it was a throbbing sensation throughout my back. And if I take painkillers, it would be absolutely fine. But if I did take painkillers, it was really, really tough. But I thought, you know what, I can't live with painkillers. Just before I actually got the diagnosis, obviously I went to, it was all around the same time, which I'll get into on the story. But I went to see, I spoke to my private healthcare at work, and they said, you can do a back assessment. Went to see a lady, and I said, look, I've been having this pain in my back every single day, and it's horrific every single evening. And she just said, she's like, you started running recently. I was like, funny enough, I started running about 3 months ago. And then her very words were, you've basically damaged your joint in your lower back. She was like, I put everything on it.
Yeah.
Yeah. He was like, she was like, she should like to go from 0 to hero. I was running like 5 miles 3 times a week. I was like, before then I wasn't doing anything. She was like, it was definitely to do with that. Then you've just gone too hard too soon. That's what it is. She was like, I'm not even going to bother doing an MRI scan. Don't worry about it. She was like, her very word, she was like, I remember she was like, I bet everything on it. She said, I bet everything, and that's what it is. So I was like, okay, it's cool. So that was something to mention. But anyway, back to the story, I guess. This lymph node in my neck. Obviously, when I found out the biopsy results was negative, I was just waiting for this thing to go down. But then I checked it again one day in November, and I was like, that is definitely, before I was like, maybe it's my OCD saying, has it got bigger? Has it got bigger? Nah, this has definitely got bigger. I could tell. It almost doubled in size. I was like, okay, I'm going back again because this ain't right. Or I wasn't actually that anxious at that point because obviously I had a biopsy. So it's just going to be, if it's anything.
Some other thing that was causing some kind of infection or swelling,
Whatever, a swollen lymph node or, hematoma or some sort, they'll just take it out. Somebody said this is a huge exposure for them. I'm sorry.
No, it's good. This is exactly what I thought was important for you doing it, and I think it's great. It's going to be the main reason I wanted to get you on here is I knew that it would be a very significant video for the OCD community and for the cancer community of seeing people's journeys. So everything you're doing and saying is very interesting for them.
Yeah, I know. I knew it was going to tickle a few nerves. Sorry.
Yeah. It's triggering here, though.
Yeah,
it's triggering.
So anyway, I was like, I went back to the doctor. This wasn't even wasn't even worried that much about it, to be fair. I wasn't. And I just said, look, this other lymph node, I had a biopsy and stuff, it's all fine. But I just want to work, it's getting bigger. So I just want to know what's going on. So I will refer you to an ENT consultant. So I saw an ENT consultant. And the guy had a look at it and was just like, I'm not sure. He was like, we usually worry about, we tend to worry about people your age, especially with length above their colour. He was like, but you've had the biopsy, I gave him all the reports I'd had. And he was like, it's probably nothing. It's probably nothing. He was like, we'll do another biopsy. And I was like, another biopsy? I was like, what's the point of another biopsy? He was like, these biopsies aren't always 100%. And I was like, oh, they're not? And then I Googled it afterwards. He was like, no, the needle biopsies are not accurate. And I was like, they should never be used, like in the medical sense, they should never be used as like a definitive diagnosis tool or anything like that. They're just sort of like a, but anyway, the guy, I was just like that one, I was like, fuck, this could still be something bad. And I was like, okay, all right, okay, fine. He was like, so we're going to send you to the same guy before, to the biopsy. I was like, okay, with the same sonographer, yeah, okay. So that was around, I think about mid-November, went back down. The guy looked at it and the ultrasound, they can measure how big the lymph node is, how big it's got. And in my mind, because I'd had like 3 or 4, I think 4, I think this time 4 ultrasounds in his lymph node, I could see how big it had got. So it had gone from like, width-wise, it had gone from like 0.8 centimetres to like 1.1 centimetres to 1.4 centimetres, and now it was 2.2 centimetres. So it was growing. It was definitely growing. And then the guy looked at it, and the ultrasound guy was just like, same guy again. I was like, so what is it then? And he was just like, I'm not sure. Again, he was like, I'm not sure. I was like, but we had the biopsy. And he was like, yeah. He was like, we don't. He was like, I think if this biopsy comes back negative, we're going to take it out and do a proper test. He was like, when we take it out, that's when we know for sure. So then I was like, okay, so this guy thinks it's something bad. It's growing, and it's growing quite substantially. I was like, okay, this doesn't look good. And at that point, it was quite weird. I thought I'd be really, really, really anxious, but it was weird. I kind of accepted that point. I was like, this is going to be bad. This is going to come back bad. So anyway, long story short, the guy was like, you need to. He took the biopsy. He was like, you'll hear back from me next week. So I made a follow-up appointment. So I had the biopsy taken on the Friday. I went on holiday. I went on a cruise with my wife for a week.
I remember, yeah.
In November. And he was going to, and I made an appointment. I had an appointment for 2 weeks' time. That was it. So I had it on the Friday, and 2 weeks Friday, the 2 weeks Friday after that, I'd find out. So in my mind, I was thinking, oh, this isn't going to be good. So I was just like, those 2 weeks I was planning for those to just enjoy those 2 weeks until we get this bad diagnosis, which it's really bad. I hadn't even really spoken about it with my wife. I didn't want to panic her. I didn't want to ruin our holiday we were going to. So, so we went on a cruise. For those of you that have been on a cruise, you don't get any signal when you're out on the sea. So I just completely turned my phone off, and I was getting phone calls. I was getting voicemail, like my phone was building up with voicemails and stuff while I was away, but I didn't think anything of it. I got back on the Monday to go straight back to work. My appointment wasn't until the Friday, so I've been away for a week. And I got back to work. It was about 9:15 on the Monday, and I had 4 missed calls from a private number on my phone. And I was thinking, okay. And then as I saw that, I saw a load of voicemails. I had like 14 voicemails on my phone. So I picked up the phone and I started listening to them. And it was like Monday. So I had the biopsy on the Friday. They'd called me back on the Monday in the morning, in the afternoon, and in the evening. On the Tuesday in the morning, in the afternoon, in the evening, they'd call me every hour, pretty much every day. I was on holiday. My phone was obviously had no signal.
So that usually is an indication that something's not
normal.
Yeah. And for you, with you still relatively anxious at that point, that's obviously a big trigger.
Yeah, definitely. So at that point, I just said, okay, that's not good. So I called. I remember I was at work, and I was like, so I got a call back actually. I said, sorry, I've had a load of missed calls. And she was like, I've been trying to get hold of you last week. Is Mr. Gunworth secretary here? Where have you been? Can't get hold of you. I've been on holiday. And she just said, he wants to see you today. And I was like, today? I was like, I tried then to test the water, be like, can I not come next week? I was like, "Can you come next week?" And she's like, "I think he really wants to see you today." And I was like, that was the moment I was like, okay, this isn't good. So we went to, so I was like, obviously I was working in London, I just got to work. And I was just like, okay, call my wife. I was like, this is what's happening. This is what's happening. They've been calling me all last week. Yeah, they want me to come in now. And my wife was really brilliant, and she'd been brilliant throughout the whole thing. And she just said, okay, well, just come to my work, and we'll go. And then at that point, I spoke to my mum and dad. I hadn't told my mum and dad or anything to do with this before then, because I didn't want to panic them, because I thought obviously everything that I've had before would come back fine. So this is just going to be another one of those cases. So I wouldn't have worried about this. But at this point, I was like, we should tell mum and dad. So my wife called my mum and dad and just said, look, this is what happened. And they were like, okay, we want to come down with you. They sent me to an address, some place in Northwood in North London. I was like, just go to the centre and the appointments at 2:30. Got there and got looked up, and it was like cancer care centre. And I was like, sorry, cancer centre. And I was like, okay, yeah, that's definitely the nail in the coffin. And then we went in. Mum and dad
not the best way to find out either, that, you know?
No.
Sort of way is not good.
Nah, so I was just like, at this point I was just sort of like, I was calm, surprisingly calm. And I was just like, okay. I sat down, mum was really distraught and she didn't want to come in, so it was just my wife and my dad went in, and the guy just sat down and was like, you know, if anyone's been through anything like this or a medical thing, the doctors, you're not thinking about, they're making small talk and stuff, and I'm just like, get to the point. The guy's coming in, he was like, so we've done the biopsy, we've done your imaging scans, and we found some additional information. I was like, yeah, just get to the point. Where I was like, yeah, where's he? He was like, so he's like, this is looking very much like a type of lymphoma. And then obviously we were like, I'd known anyway, we went to the room, there was like a Macmillan nurse and stuff, and for those in the US, that's like a cancer charity, and they're usually present for people when they get a cancer diagnosis. So at that point I was like, okay. And then obviously, like I said, I'd kind of known that it was going to be a bad news. Mum and dad were there, and obviously it was a really horrible sort of day, I guess, of everyone finding out. But yeah, so that's where we got to. After that,
that's like the first biggest hit in the sort of journey where you're being told you've got cancer. Suddenly, a realization from someone who'd been suffering from health OCD for a long time has suddenly had a realization that the thing that they were terrified of is actually becoming their reality. Now, just for people watching this with OCD, the Alfie's situation is a very rare situation. It's not something that is hugely common. But the reason we are obviously covering this is because of Alfie's OCD journey with me, and his story and his amazing outlook on things. And we wanted to cover that because it's, one, a great exposure, two, it great understanding for OCD and for the cancer community as well, understanding a person's journey out, they've got cancer, and how they came to handle that. So just to sort of bring people up to date so they understand the situation, because with health OCD, obviously it's triggering hearing a story like that, but a very good exposure, and that's why I thought it'd be important to bring you on.
Yeah, like I said, I wouldn't read too much into this. I know it's going to be a good exposure for everyone else, but like I said, I've taken all of the bad luck for all of the OCD sufferers out there, so don't worry about it. Sorry. So yeah, I guess it kind of progressed after that. We obviously, when you get the cancer diagnosis, everything moves a bit quicker. I had surgery to have the lymph node taken out, and it was kind of a couple of other hits from there, really. We went back to see the consultant, and I had a PET scan where they basically inject you with some radioactive sugar, and they tell you, it basically shows up on the scan as to where everything is, and then they'll give you a staging. Obviously, it goes stage 1, 2, 3, or 4 being the worst. The guy was like, I think it's only 1, because when I had surgery and they took like 4 lymph nodes out. I could only feel 1, but they took up 4 lymph nodes. And the guy said, I think it's probably just 1. We may have got everything out from surgery. You may just need 1 or 2 couple of cycles of chemotherapy just to make sure. So we went back and we waited for the PET scan results to come through. And the guy was having problems speaking to the radiologist department. And he was like, okay, I'm looking at the scan. I can only see 1 picture. He was like, but this is I can see your whole body on here, and I can't see any active lymph nodes. He was like, so this is looking pretty good. So he was like, you may have just got away with stage 1. He was like, this is really good news. Okay. He was like, but I need to wait until get the report through. So my wife and my mum went outside, and then he came back in half an hour later. He was like, so I've got the report. He was like, I'll just read it out to you right now. I can't get the images up, but I've got the report here. And then like the first line of the report, it was like stage 4 disease. Bones, lungs, pleura. It literally said where the cancer had spread, and it had gone from, I had lymph nodes in my chest, my stomach, it was in my bone marrow, it was in my bone, my pelvis, in my right leg, in my chest, my sternum, and 2 areas of my ribs, 2 ribs areas. So I was just like, okay, so it's gone from being Hodgkin, when I say, I probably haven't mentioned
from being balanced in your mind, where you'd come to some sort of realization of what you could accept, to the far end of the spectrum now scaring you a lot.
Yeah, exactly. And something to mention, I was actually given diagnosed with Hodgkin lymphoma. And for those that don't know, Hodgkin lymphoma is the more curable Hodgkin lymphoma. And if everyone says you get cancer, everyone says Hodgkin lymphoma is the one you want to get because it's got a high cure rate. But most people are caught around stage 1 or 2. But obviously, when I found out that it was Hodgkin, I was like, oh, that's cool. There's good survival rates. The doctors told me that the survival rates are really good and everything. And then you find out that it's everywhere. And then I was just like, okay.
I just want to point out at this point, when you found out then that it's everywhere, how were you feeling at this point?
I think I kind of had the suspicion. Again, I kind of had a suspicion because I'd always back pain, and I knew that this back pain is, it's too much of a coincidence to relate him to nothing. It's just a problem with my back. So I kind of expected it to be stage 4. But then obviously when they told me where it is and how much it was, where it was, so it's a bit scary. And it's still a bit scary now when I think about it. When I look at the scan and it's everywhere, you're like, oh, fuck. But it's
completely understandable.
It hasn't been like for anyone with OCD. I know how horrible it is to have OCD, but it's never as bad. It hasn't been great. It's been pretty shit for the last few weeks and a few months that since we've had the diagnosis and go through the chemotherapy and stuff. But it's not been as bad as what I thought it would be. It's been bad, but it hasn't been as bad as I thought it would be. With OCD, I think
incredible outlook for such a short period of working through rational thinking. Alfie, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna split this video now. I'm just gonna end this live, save it, and then I'm gonna add you straight back in about 30 seconds, and we're gonna carry on there just so we split it into 2 halves, so it's easier for people to watch when I put it up on YouTube. So I'll just end this now, and then I'll call you straight back.
Yeah, no problem. Cool.
See you in a second.
Bye.
Right. Back to where we were. I'm just going to be adding Alfie back, so hopefully this all connects fine, so we can hear about the rest of his story with OCD and with cancer. So I'm just waiting for him to join. Sometimes this can take a couple of times to rejoin but this should hopefully work okay this time. Right, perfect, Alfie. That will work fine. So back to where you were saying you just had your realisation that the cancer was stage 4 in the lungs and in the bone, and the realisation to you that wasn't as scary as you thought when you actually faced that fear, and you were sort of giving us a bit of an understanding of that and how you were sort of thinking about that and taking that in.
Yeah, I think it was... when you find that out, and then obviously when you get given a stage 4 cancer diagnosis, it's never as good as the others. So you know that in my case, the survival rate is still pretty good. It's not as good as it was if it was just stage 1 or 2. But I think when you're in the situation and you get sprung into it and it happens to you, it's never it's never as bad as.
Now that's obviously different for different people, because some people who go through it are obviously find it very difficult to handle. You're a pretty remarkable case in terms of your own way you've dealt with it, but also in terms of the way you were rationally processing it. I've worked with various people over the years with cancer. The way you're handling it really stands out, and I want to highlight that because that's a very important part of this story. because a lot of people certainly wouldn't. I mean, a lot of people looked to me on this OCD page as someone who's pretty rational about everything. And as much as I would like to think I would be in the same perspective as you, as I imagine through the theory and my understanding of things, I would like to think so. But in reality, until an individual has been in the same position as you, they can never say how they would feel in that situation.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's why I look to the way you're handling it. I think it's a real inspiration.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's you get sort of thrown into like a new world. Like I've always been. It's so you get. I can't explain what it's like, but your whole perspective on everything changes immediately. Like I still have mostly good days. I do have bad days. I'm not gonna lie. There are days where I'm just like, how the fuck has this happened? How unlucky am I to have this and then this and then this, and it's all to happen. And then there are days when you start wondering, like in my personal situation, I am not scared of dying at all. Like I'm not religious. I have no belief. I just believe we're here and then we're not here and we return to the state we were before we were born. And if dying and being dead does not scare me at all, like that, no fear at all. It's the fear. The thing that scares me the most is leaving like my wife, my mum and dad, and my family behind. That's the one thing that's scaring me.
As you often say to me, it's the old Mark Twain quote. You're not afraid of what happened to you before we were born, and we didn't exist for all eternity before that. And so, just going back to that position, why would I be scared? And to see someone who, embracing that and seeing that and feeling that is an incredible thing given the circumstances.
Yeah, and I think that's where I spent a lot of my time a lot recently. I've been reading a lot of books and listening to a lot of sort of like Alan Watts, things like that. Yeah, it really does help, and it just changes your perspective on everything. And just getting into reading some really strange books that I was never reading before about the cosmos, and just really random stuff about consciousness, just to change my whole perspective on life. Because when this situation happens, it does change your perspective. I don't know how long. Fingers crossed, I'll have many years left.
As isolating as it can feel with any disease or anything, you're one of many people that have been through the same thing, and we are all terminally ill. Is a quote in the,
that's a good one.
We're all gonna be dead anyway. It's only a matter of time. And in the scheme of the universe, our time is incredibly short. So, and none of us know how long we've got. So it's when you start looking at it and changing your perspective on it like that, you're not going through anything that any of us aren't going to go through. We're going to go through it with various different ways, but in terms of the road, we are all walking the same path.
Yeah, it's a good point, and I also saw something similar recently, which is I found quite funny. Because obviously now I'm in two communities now. Obviously, it's the OCD community, and also I get the cancer community. And the cancer community is funny because there are people in there. There's really dark humour on there, and it's really funny, and people find it funny. And that's one of the main things that I like about having cancer. If there's anything you can like about it,
we do that here in the OCD community.
Yeah, I like it. Yeah,
always make it a laugh, whatever, because you got to. It's like you and me laugh when I was talking you about your cancer diagnosis. You were messaging me jokes saying like, oh my God, look at this happening and so on. But you've got to have that attitude, because what's the point of having any other attitude?
That's it. And I kind of like it when people, I do with mum and dad, and it's bad. And I make jokes. Like someone said today, like, oh, you going on holiday next year? I was like, oh, well, yeah, definitely if I'm still alive. And they're like, oh, don't say that, but I love it. It's so funny. I find it so funny. But
you're very good.
It's I saw something else earlier on, the OCD with the cancer community, maybe the OCD community as well, but they're looking at statistics. So they've got a disease or they've got a particular cancer. You want to know what your stats are. They call it your stats. So your overall survival, your 5-year survival rate is what they usually refer to, and it's usually like people with whatever different types of cancer have different stats. And everyone's looking at, and I saw someone put on here like, oh, the survival rate for my cancer is only 5% or 10%, and it's really sad. And then I saw someone else put on there, life, overall survival 0%, no one's getting out of this alive. And it was really it was a really good one. And just like thinking of it like that, I'm sorry to say that everyone listening to this video is going to die, and everyone's got a terminal illness and it's aging, because we're all going to die. So when you change your perspective on that and just try and sort of change, rather than be like, why me, why not me? This is the situation you're in, you just got to deal with it.
Incredible to be saying it when you're in the position is another thing altogether.
Like I said, I'm not going to say that. I'm not going to say that it's like an easy ride, because I've had, like I said, I feel good now, and I'm going out with some friends tonight, and I feel good. But then there are days when you're just like, there are good and bad days, and everyone says good and bad days, but when you actually realise there are good and bad days, you have a day when you just drive and you're like, oh, what is this? Like, why can't I just have? Why can't it just be normal for everyone else? Why can't I just be lucky and not have this? But it's an experience, and hopefully, when we get through it, will have a good impact on my life, and I hope on somebody else's. We've done this, change your perspective on everything.
Can you tell us a little bit about the journey with the chemotherapy and sort of that part of the journey, so we can have a bit of an understanding of sort of how it moves along?
Yeah, so in my case, so when you get diagnosed with Hodgkin lymphoma, you typically anywhere you live, in America, UK, you'd be given a chemotherapy regime. They call it ABVD. So it's 4 types of chemotherapy drugs which they use in combination. And for Hodgkin lymphoma, depending on what stage you're at, so if you're stage 1, 2, or I think 1 or 2, you'll get 4 cycles, which is 4 months worth of treatment. And if you're stage 3 or 4, they'll give you 6 months treatment. Unfortunately, because my disease was quite far advanced, I was given an option of something else, which is a different type of chemotherapy regime. So it's not the typical Hodgkin lymphoma, and they've never really done it much in the UK before. It's actually a German regime. It's called, they call it escalated BCOP, so it's BEACOPP. So it's 7 different types of chemotherapy drugs, and it's a lot more intense than the other one. The other one, we'd have chemotherapy once every 2 weeks for 12 cycles, so for 12 rounds.
Could you give a breakdown for them, just difference between the sort of survival rates and why you chose your one, just so that they can get an idea?
So the guy was quite frank with me when we went in there. He was just said, look, this is, if you were to have ABVD, he was like, well, I'm going to give you cure rates. He was like, I don't want to give you overall survival rates. Cure rates is basically you don't relapse, you have your treatment, and that's it, and you're good. So he said the ABVD, it's usually around 65 to 70% for people in your case. So that's what we typically give. And he was like, but there is another option you can have. It's called escalated BCOP. It's this German regime. He was like, it's a lot more effective drug, so it cures more people. So it's more around 85% cure rate, but it is a lot more toxic. You'd have to sign off. I did have to sign off, because I did go for that option in the end. You have to sign off that there's a 3 or 4% risk of cancer, and a secondary cancer, just from the chemotherapy alone. So they call it like toxicity of the drug. So there is significant toxicity to this chemo regime, but overall, they think that in my situation, it'll be better for me overall. All things considered, it would be the best thing. So
now, I remember discussing with you at the time, and just because you and me, we always talk very openly about things, and we discuss sort of hard questions and confront things, because I think that's important, which is a way that I think is important to deal with things. And I think for you always found that when I discussed it with you, it's important for you for me to address things like that, and for us to discuss it like that. And I remember at the time playing it out as if I was you, and thinking that was the option that I would take, and then seeing that your option had matched what I liked as well. Not that I had an influence decision, because I wasn't there, but just to hear to hear it matching. And I thought, well, that probably was the best choice given the situation.
Yeah, I mean, and there was a couple of other considerations in that as well. I mean, my wife and I, we've been trying for a baby for the last sort of 2 or 3 years, and we hadn't had much luck. And this more intensive regime would make me infertile, like almost 100%. What else was there? There was a couple of other things. This comes with its own anxiety and psychological trouble too. In its own journey, obviously not being able to have children is a huge trigger for a lot of people with OCD for various reasons, be it towards health, be it towards our OCD, and so on. So that brings about its own specific psychological things that you're being confronted with at that period of time. Yeah, exactly. And I think that was a really tough decision for my wife and I personally, because that was something that had been our main life goal for the past 2 years. just, trying to get pregnant, and it just hasn't really worked out for us. So that having to have, obviously there was other options, freezing sperm and stuff, but it was a really tough decision. And one of the other things which people don't pick this chemo regime is because it does ruin your body. He said it's a short regime, so whereas the other one will be 6 months, this will only be.
You ain't looking that bad, Alfie. You ain't.
I know, yeah, I don't look too bad. I've actually got off all right, to be fair. But I mean, he said this will every cycle I have, so I'll have 4 or 6 cycles depending on my next scan results. But he said this will, this is a really tough regime, and he was like, you get neutropenic, which is, for those of you that don't know, it's like when your white blood cells, because the chemo damages all your bone marrow, it stops you from being able to produce any white blood cells in your blood. So my white blood cells or my neutrophils go down to 0 every cycle, and then I have to take these injections which get them going again. But at that point, there's like a window for like 5 days where I have no immune system.
That hospital bed where you didn't look well at all.
Yeah, I have no immune system, and if any infection which you have, whereas your body would normally just fight it off without even blinking, he was like, "This will kill you." It's called,
that could be its own OCD fear, given the fact you've got OCD. Yeah, well, what happens if someone comes in with a cough and then I die? What happens if I get this? What happens if I get that? It brings its own whole host of other problems to the mix psychologically.
Absolutely, and I think that's sort of like been a good exposure for me, really, because have this constant. It's a constant risk attached to this chemo regime. I have like a card here, so like if I get pulled into, so obviously I'm at high risk. My bloods, I got tested yesterday. My bloods are okay at the moment, but on Friday they were 0. So for the whole weekend I was having to make sure. But you get given this card, which is basically like an urgent. If I ever get a temperature above like a certain 38 degrees, they basically run to an A&E and give this to them, and they said, and they'll hook you up to antibiotics. So, and people don't like doing that because the guy just said as well, there's a risk of dying, because if you don't get antibiotics, you will die because you'll be septic. And he said that usually happens in around 40% of people that have this chemo, and it actually happened to me recently. It happened to me on the 2nd cycle on the first day.
You didn't look well in that picture at all.
No, and that was pretty tough. I just had a fever straight away, and then I knew that something was up. It was really, and it was just, there was loads of other different things that went into making that decision of having to pick this, but hopefully we made the right decision. Obviously we won't know yet, but that was some around having to make those decisions out of those 2 survival rates. Yeah, it was a tough one.
And when is your next test to find out about how you're doing?
Yeah, so I finished my 2nd cycle now. So this is the week I have where I'm actually all right. So I'm going to see friends tonight, and I've been out with my cousin this morning.
Yeah, so just to highlight to people watching, obviously in a week's time with Alfie's test results, he's finding out, Alfie, you can explain it better than me.
Obviously, this is quite like an important test, or important procedure for them to do. Obviously, I had the PET scan to begin with, and it tells you where the cancer is. This scan will tell me how I've reacted to chemotherapy.
Whether the cancer is beating the chemo.
Yeah, exactly.
Chemo is beating the cancer.
Exactly. Yeah. So we'll find out. So I'm having the PET scan in Oxford on Friday, and I get the results on Wednesday. That's
OCD sufferers. Yeah. This would be probably the highest level of health anxiety fear you could get. That waiting to find that result. Now, with the fact that you're doing this interview with me here on Instagram Live and laughing at times and going along, isn't it incredible to be doing that in that position?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, maybe you should cut yourself some slack, because there are.
You have to cut yourself some slack.
Yeah.
Now you don't. Very few people would be doing it like you are right now. I can tell you. So you've got to cut yourself a lot of slack. I hold you in a very high regard, and I think what you're doing in terms of how your perspective on things is something of very, very rational, and just the way you're helping people by talking like this at such a difficult time is hugely helpful for them.
Oh, thank you.
And triggering. Some of them are thinking, fucking hell, Rob, why did you bring this guy Alfie on? I'm just about to have my dinner and now I've seen this.
I know. And I think I've said I've had a couple of people, when you posted one of my page, I've had a couple of people message me, and I could tell they were seeking some reassurance. I don't think I gave it to them, but
yeah, good. I'm watching out. You're not giving out reassurance.
Yeah, no, I'm not giving any reassurance. But no, back to your point now, it's it's going to be. I can't lie. I'm pretty nervous for next week. It's quite funny when you obviously now I'm aware of this cancer community. There's like a new term that I've been made aware of. It's called scanxiety. So it's basically you're anxiously waiting the results of your next cancer scan.
I've had that on a lower level with health anxiety over the years, waiting for test results, as do most of the community. But in your situation, it's very different.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, it is what it is. We'll see. We've done it. The thing that we can't have any regrets about is we've picked the more aggressive treatment. If I would have picked the less aggressive treatment and then
yes, exactly,
I found out that it wasn't working, I think I would have then. I wish I went for that one, but we've gone for the more aggressive treatment. Whatever happens now. We've done everything we can, so you just have to see what happens. And there's not. It's not. Yeah, if we get bad news on Wednesday, we get bad news on Wednesday. There are still different treatment options out there. We've made aware of immunotherapy and sort of transplants and stuff. So it's not the end of the world, but it's just an anxious wait then to find out.
Now, Alfie, I think the detailed journey you've given of your journey has been incredible. Talking it all through and how you're approaching things right now, and hearing about your perspective on death and seeing how your perspective it doesn't lead to chronic anxiety and that's not your main fear. A sensitive topic, but right now, what would you say is the things that do make you anxious about this journey, the things that you are scared about involved in the future? What could happen? What things do you find difficult? What things do you find, or what things? Just a bit of information about that.
Yeah, I mean the main thing I'm scared about is the number one fear is obviously if things don't go well and having to leave my family, like my wife especially, and obviously my mum and dad and my family. That fear is the one that's getting me at the moment. That's the one that's if I didn't have a family, I can tell you if I didn't have a family, I was just on my own for this, I'd be absolutely fine with this because like I said, I've got no problem with death.
It's a different thing when you factor family. It's different factors, different questions again for other people who have children. Then they would have a different view or different circumstances that come around. Most of the problems that are involved around these kind of situations tend to be ones of losing family, ones of death, ones of financial situations linked to it, all variations of problems and concerns that affect people in varying ways. So that's why I thought it was interesting to discuss that.
Yeah, no, that's definitely in terms of everything else, that's number one. Like just the fear of my partner being alone and having to mourn and grieve. I'm thinking obviously this is my mind that when I get into bad places, when your mind's eating away and saying what if this happens, what if that happens, and that's the one thing that bothers me. And that's the thing I need to tackle. What about
the actual process involved with if it came to a situation like that with the actual passing away? Does how you die? How does that concern you in that situation?
So it's actually something that I spoke to you about recently. I think.
Yeah. No, I know you did.
Obviously, I don't want to get into that attitude of this is what happens if because I think it's a slippery slope. If you start accepting it, then I think that you probably end up there. So, but there is something that I'd thought of, like if worst case scenario, how does Hodgkin's lymphoma kill you? How does it kill people that die from it? And
don't feel obligated to answer those questions. It was only, I just thought it was something that you might want to mention. But if you don't have to mention that,
I'm more than happy to answer that question. No, because it was something that it was on my mind. So it was, I think it was usually pulmonary. So I've got a couple of two tumours on my lungs, and I think that they usually stop breathing. So they call it like you die from shortness of breath, basically. So that's how it. And I imagine.
You get medication, all kinds of things.
Exactly.
So it's not the situation that you imagine it to be. But I thought it was interesting to cover that. But I think obviously with the attitude, acceptance isn't agreement. We are completely fighting to win, to live, to survive, to do that. but we're acknowledging at the same time that even if those situations were to occur, being at peace with those. And I think that's what's always been good with the way we've worked through this journey is talking about those, because if we don't talk about them, then we get worried, what if something we haven't thought about? So it's good to talk about it, but 100% we're going for the other option.
Yeah, absolutely. No, 100%. So I know, like I said, I know if that the worst case scenario, I know what the worst case scenario is for me. So, like I said, I know people may have other problems like financial worries at this point, or worries about how they're going to die and stuff like that. Whereas that doesn't bother me. There's nothing that bothers me. It's the only one thing. It's literally worrying about how other people will be when I go, if I go.
Yeah, so completely understandable.
That's the main thing. If I didn't have that at the moment, I think I'd be pretty smooth with this journey.
At the moment, you don't want to be talking about that all the time, and you want to be focused on living life, because you don't want to be doing that. The only thing with the talking on here, I think, because you're somebody who talks about all subjects and sort of faces them, confronts them, and makes peace with them. I've always thought your insight has been incredible in terms of insight for myself, learning from the ways that you're dealing with things, and for other people in all the different concerns they have, as well as the cancer community going through the same sort of things.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, but I'm hoping people have found this helpful.
Well, they will have found it very, very, very helpful. It's very rare to be able to speak with somebody with insight like yours, as well as have to hear the journey of health OCD and moving into something more challenging like this. But I mean, all of your journey is a journey, and all of your questions are questions and parts of the journey for OCD sufferers, and questions and parts of the journey for people battling cancer. So it's all very, very interesting to see that each step of the way. I remember working with people that have told me they're not frightened of death at all, but they're very concerned about financial constraints placed on their family. Then there are other people I've spoken to are very terrified of the dying process, not terrified of death at all. Other people that are terrified of death, not so concerned about the other elements. And it varies depending on the person, depending on different belief systems that different people have. And I always say to people, everything comes from a particular perspective. Your journey is in no way, I imagine, any different to what I could be experiencing myself, possibly in a short time, possibly in a long time. I have no doubt. Death for anybody in those circumstances is never going to be a pleasant thing, but it's something that is part of being human. It's all of our existence. And so I think discussing that with you today has given us a great insight on that. But like I say, with everything about bringing things for the ride, it's not about talking about it, it's about living life and doing the best we can with the time we have. And I think that's particularly important in everything, in any things that we face that's a difficult challenge or anything in life. If you look at just the passing of Kobe Bryant the other day, I very much doubt he was thinking on that day that was his last day. And so you can look at any situation, and nor if you'd asked him a few months ago how did he think he might pass away in the future, I don't think he was thinking to pass away in that particular way in those circumstances. So our lives are completely uncertain. We do not know what is round the corner. It's a situation where anything can unfold, and we go with the uncertainty of not knowing.
Exactly. Roll with it.
Anything you want to add, Alfie, before we wrap this up?
No, I'm cool. No, I don't know if anyone has any questions or anything. Happy to answer anything, but I'm covered pretty much everything.
If you ask a question like that, you're going to get about 1,000 reassurance questions. I found this thing on my shoulder while listening to Alfie, and did yours look like this? Yeah,
don't be surprised. I'll hold out for those ones.
Yeah, well, Alfie, listen, thank you very much for coming on here. And if you want to follow Alfie, it's on Hodgkin's blog, Instagram page, Hodgkin's blog. So you can see Alfie's journey and how he's going with things. And I think that's a great one for anyone suffering with health OCD, facing the fear and doing it. Alfie, when he came in, obviously health OCD was a big concern, and I thought that when he would start going down this situation, I really thought that you'd be 10,000 times worse than how you have dealt with things. So it's exactly the opposite.
Oh, thanks, Rob. Thanks for that.
Alfie, we will leave things now. Thank you so much for coming on here, and we'll follow along with your journey, and hoping everything obviously turns out well for you, and we will touch base and see how things are going. All right, Alfie.
Cheers, Rob. Thanks for having me.
See you later.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.